Welcome to the virtual video presentation. Today, we will give you specific ideas that you can turn into results. And, of course, the title you see there, Inspired Virtual Presentations, a how-to for making inspired presentations and ones that rock. My name is Jess Todtfeld, and I appreciate you taking time out of your life and tuning in here, and I want to give you many ideas you can act on. You have already noticed something is different. When we tune into a webinar, we have an expectation. We know that we will see a boring PowerPoint. I'm trying to be nice, as I worked with many clients who showed me this is what we give our clients or what we've shown them, and I've wanted to take blunt objects and poke myself in the eye with them. And they knew that. That's why they came to me. But for all of you, you're noticing a few things. You're noticing that there is video that is being used. You're noticing that it's just a little bit different. It's a little bit more interactive. If you are tuning in and this is the live version, well then down below you can type in the chat box and ask questions. And if you're watching this on a replay, well then you can email me, jess@successinmedia.com. Let's jump right in, shall we? Let's not waste a whole lot of time with the preamble. All right, what do you see over there? Oh, GoToWebinar, which is a fine company. But when I see that PowerPoint come up with the pie charts, there you go, the pie charts and lots of text on the screen and all of those little control panels, and when I'm an audience member, I usually click on the wrong one. That's not usually a great thing. I know what I'm in for. So the question is this the most effective way to deliver a presentation? I'm going to run through a few of the other options here, talk about a couple of pros and cons, and then really get deep into what you can do for style, for substance, for feeling better during your presentation. Here's another way to give a virtual presentation: Skype. I could have just Skyped in with all of you, and of course, since there are many of you who are watching this would have been just me talking. It would have been very hard to see all of you, and then we'd have to make sure your webcams were working properly. But Skype can be really great for just a one-on-one conversation on different continents. I've done it, and it's been wonderful. When it comes to a few of the live streaming options, one that we have is actually live stream, as you see over there. Another is called Ustream, and they're all pretty good. There's another one, another popular one, Justin.tv. They're all okay, but it does require you to have a computer that has a lot of memory, that it works well. They even have big pro options where you can put fancy cameras. What I've done today is I've used a hybrid of a few of these pieces, including a program that Livestream offers for free called Livestream Procaster, and that's how you're able to see the video push in and out and me at the bottom of the screen. And I've combined it with a few other things that I will bring up to you later. YouTube is an option if you're doing a presentation, and you can either put your PowerPoint there or you can just speak to video. You can have somebody hold up an iPhone and record it. Make sure your audio is good. And they also have live options now. There's YouNow, which is probably used more by kids and musicians and people like that guy that you see there, but it is another option that's out there, and it's okay. Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts is Google's version of, say, Skype, and it works pretty nicely. They've put it under that umbrella of Google+, so whether you go in through YouTube and end up there, or you go in through Gmail and you end up there, you can use it, but everybody else who you're talking to must have a Google ID or a Gmail account to be able to be a part of it, and then even then they need to download a few things. I was considering using it today to talk with all of you, but I knew that it would be limiting for some people who said, I have to download something, forget it. I knew it would be better to just put this on a web page and have you all tune in. Let's not forget FaceTime, and FaceTime is amazing, I think, but you have to make sure both people have an Apple device. It will only work on Apple devices. So, but I had a pretty big organization in Washington, D.C. I'm in New York, as you see by this genuine fake backdrop of the New York City skyline behind me, that's where I am. And I wanted them to see me. This is after I had done some work there, and I said, it'd be great if you can pipe me in some way or Skype so I can look people in the eye and say, how has it been going? And the shortest, easiest way was for us to just hook up 2 iPads. Actually, I used my computer, which worked well, and they got to see my face, and I sat in front of the backdrop, and it looked extra fancy. WebEx is one that businesses use often, and it's usually pretty good when it works. It's a little clunky sometimes, and what you're seeing on the screen right now is the PowerPoint and the person, you're seeing themselves, and a lot of times people will elect not to put their face up there. And part of it, as I look on there, you see that guy is wearing what looks like an undershirt and some sort of wacky headset. It requires sometimes people putting makeup on or maybe turning on a few lights, as I have one special light that I turned on here as opposed to our normal TV lights, which I do not have turned on today. It was too much for a webcam. I could have done this with a very fancy video camera and edited it together. It would have been full 1080p high definition video and fancy effects going back and forth, but I wanted to put something together today that you could say, hey, I could do that. And I'll tell you, I often use Skype, and there is actually a way for you to share the Skype screen. As I go back, let's jump back to Skype for a second here. A lot of people think that you have to get the premium version to be able to share your screen, but you need to toggle a few different buttons to be able to do it, and it can be pretty effective, especially if somebody is already on there. Let's jump back in. Slide share is a presentation option. There's so many options, but I want you to know what is there before you decide what is smartest for you and the people that you are speaking to. So SlideShare is a website. It's kind of a social network where people are sharing PowerPoints. I know it sounds like something Al Gore came up with, but it is something that I think is really great. There's really a lot of wonderful content. You can learn a lot. This one is pretty interesting, and I'm just going to make this extra full screen for a second here so that you can see what's there. It's called Prezi, and what Prezi does is Prezi allows you to make presentations that are a little bit fancier, and you can see there, you zoom in, you zoom out, and you can do it as you're clicking. You can have it set to do that, play videos in those presentations. But my question for all of you is, you're watching this and saying, that's pretty snazzy, and you just go to their Prezi website, Google Prezi, I can't remember if it's Prezi.com or not, but my question for you is, would that have been most effective today? If I had just spent the entire day zooming in and zooming out and zooming in, would you have felt like you were on a carnival ride? Possibly. But that is pretty snazzy for coming up with a 90-second little promo that you can then take and put on YouTube and embed in your website and do it however you do it. It could be the right thing. Let's jump back in. Of course, let's not forget, there you see it. Just you could make a standard PowerPoint and you could email it to someone. Make it an attachment. 18 megabyte attachment. Click and send, and of course when they click, they see the little message. Oh, let's see what it says. You should only open attachments from a trustworthy source. Is that person who sent me the proposal a trustworthy source? Is there a possibility of trouble there? I'll look at it later. Click. And they may not even look at what you sent. All this comes back to, yes, PowerPoint. And we know there's a love-hate relationship when it comes to PowerPoint. We love using it, and people hate looking at it. But there is a way to make the PowerPoint work for you. I want to make sure not to neglect Keynote, which is another option out there, and that's a Mac-only program. I happen to like Keynote mainly because it's faster. You can just click and do things much quicker. And you'll see on there some of the templates that come with it. And I have a secret for you right out of the gate. Don't use any of the templates for either Keynote or PowerPoint. They're terrible. I'll tell you a better way. All right, here we go. We'll keep this thing moving along. Oh, just a couple of other ones. On the highest end, we have Cisco. I was actually at a company last week, and we did a virtual presentation conversation with people in London. And as you see on the screen there, it really looks like they're in the room. And the person on the London side stood up, went over to a screen and said that they changed, they zoomed out so we could see. And they put a PowerPoint, and they turned their back on us, and everybody in New York, where I'm based, tuned out. They tuned out and wanted nothing to do with it. That would be the top end. And, again, you have to ask the question, is this the right method for me to present ideas with the idea of creating action and results? Of course, on the flip end, snail mail. Yes, snail mail. You could just take a brochure and send it through the mail. These are all options. Let's figure out where we can start. Where is the starting place? And before I do that, I want to at least tell you exactly who I am. And my name is Jess Todtfeld. As you see on there, I am president of Success in Media. I work with people who want to feel more comfortable and confident giving speeches, presentations, and media interviews. Basically, that means people who want to create results. They want to get something out of what it is that we do together. And you see some of my other credentials and credits on there as well. Worked with some other big companies, and I'm a former TV producer. Now, it all comes down to this. What do you want to create as a result of the presentation you give? And it's very important for me to mention, me sitting here looking at you virtually, that's one type of presentation. Me walking around, if I were at your office and looking people in the eye and talking to them, that's another type of presentation. Just the PowerPoint, as I flip back over, that is another type of presentation. And if I gave handouts, that's another type of presentation. All of these can either work together or work against each other when you're deciding what it is that you should do. So where do we start? How do we make sure we do the right job keeping that outcome in our heads? Well, here it is. You must know the purpose of your speech or presentation. Are you trying to sell something? Are you trying to educate and inform? Are you trying to get people to act on safety information? What is the purpose? And then once you know the purpose, you can decide what's the smartest way to deliver that information. Maybe the smartest way for me to deliver information on safety procedures would be to give a safety booklet out to everybody and say, you must read this and we will talk about it in 10 minutes. Then I know everybody read it and we had a conversation about it and people had a chance to customize it for their lives. Maybe that would be the smartest way and not necessarily put them to sleep in front of a big PowerPoint that's behind me. So where to start is always very important. And let's talk a minute about audience. You see on there the question, can you build around them? Always build around your audience. It's not about us, it's about them. It's about being audience-centered. What is it that your audience needs? And the best things, only the best things happen during a presentation when you are audience-focused, when you let go of what is good for me. I'll tell you what's best for me today. What's best for me, as I click back over here, is if I take myself off the screen and I just read bullet points to you the whole time. That is not interesting, not as interesting for all of you than to see a human being who's looking at you and talking to you and creating sidebars. I'm even leaving in the fact that I stumbled on a word. You know why? That's how human beings speak. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm trying to give you, audience-centered, the right information. And ideally, after you watch this today, you can go out and act on it, and you'll say, hey, I got something that I could really use, and you can create results. So what do you bring to the table when it comes to your presentations? And it could be style. Maybe you're somebody who has some great style. It could be substance. Maybe you have some great experience, or maybe you're a people person. All those are great and important, but I want to take a little sidebar for a second here. Is it as effective when I show you builds on a screen or I make you read off the screen? Now, sometimes You might say, well, Jess, it was kind of nice that I can hear what you're saying and I also see the visual on there. I see them both. That was nice. Maybe you say, no, I would rather just see a human being. I tend to go with less words, and I've done a little bit of both today so that you can see what you like, what you don't like, what you might do. But words on the screen without, and I'm going to just delete this here and move this over. Let's grab this and just move it over. All right, there we go. If I had just done that, boring. It would not have been as good. I tend to go with visuals. And taking visuals to the full next step, why don't I also give you a magic formula? That would be kind of nice. This is a formula for being, notice I didn't have all sorts of bullet points, and it's just something that supported what it is that I'm saying. What if I could give you a magic formula to create any kind of presentation? And my goal for you today is that you can not only create better virtual presentations, but really any presentation, that you can have this formula to create out where it is you should go and what is most effective. Here it is. Story, point, repeat. Essentially, that is the magic formula. I've waved the wand, I've made this come together. Stories are how we communicate to each other as people. There is always this knee-jerk response, and I'm trying to be polite as I'm thinking about the words to explain how this happens. For us to take lots and lots of data and dump it into a PowerPoint and then read it to people. And it turns out people don't love that so much. But what they do love are hearing people give stories and examples. And if I saw you on a Monday morning and I said, hi, you, because I don't know your name over there, how was your weekend? You probably would not launch into, well, let's say I got out of bed and then I went into the bathroom and I took my toothbrush and I put some toothpaste on it and I moved from the left and I moved to the right and then I went to the next room and I took some cereal and I took a bowl and I took some milk. You wouldn't do a list. That's what people tend to do when they use PowerPoint, when they give a special presentation. There's only two types of presentations. You know what they are? Only two types? Good and bad. So we tend to give these lists the way we like information as human beings, as I bring it back on there, is we like stories. Stories are the currency of life. And if I asked you what your weekend was like, you wouldn't have given me the list. You would have said, oh, it was good. In fact, my cousin came into town. You're not going to believe what happened. Well, that we did this, that we went here, and you start giving me a story of what happened. And I've worked with some CEOs, and I've explained this to them, and they said, I will not give any stories. I'm not a storyteller. This is not a fireside chat or children's hour. And I said, well, how about some examples of what you've seen? And this is one person with a factory, that you've seen some anecdotes of what you've seen in your factories. And he said, that I can do. I don't know why that somehow worked. It's the exact same thing, but he was able to wrap his head around it. So we have a magic formula that you can use, and make sure that every story that you give has a point. Ellen DeGeneres had a book a few years back called My Point, and I do have one. Always make sure that your story has a point. You can begin with the point, and you can end with the point. You can do one or the other or both, but make sure people understand the reason why you told a story. And the other piece of pushback that I get when I work with organizations is people say, well, I won't have time to get all the information in. I won't get to all of it. I must chop out these stories. A lot of times the stories will take 10 seconds. I just talked about the CEO. I think it took me 8 seconds. You can use them. But there's a magic phrase that will help you to bridge that gap, and you should definitely use it anytime you give a speech or a presentation. Are you ready? You want to know what it is? For example, when I was speaking to that CEO, they didn't like the word story, so I used a different word and it was fine. That was a for example moment. You can use this anytime. I want to take a sidestep here, and I just want to talk about the PowerPoint screens that you're seeing. I did not use any template for this. What I did was I just changed the background slightly, gray, black, and you can just take a big box and pull these out. I decided to bold some words, and this is just an image that I pulled from somewhere and added it on there. And hopefully it looks just fine. You can really make PowerPoint graphics that are 1,000 times better and have more of an impact without going and trying to become a graphic artist. And believe me, I am definitely not a graphic artist, but I figured out many different little workarounds here. Let's jump into style for a second. There's that guy trying to look all stylish. Okay, that's me. But what I'm talking about is not putting on a pose. It's basically, if we're giving a standard presentation, what should you do? You should move around. So, one of my goals is I really want to affect in a good way all of your presentations. I'm sitting on a stool today to give you this. But if I were standing here, and I could have done this standing the whole time, and this was a choice I had to make. I could have said, here's what you do when you go out there and you give speeches, you give presentations. I could have walked around as if I were in front of the room. The problem is after a few minutes, because this is virtual, that would be boring. To just look at somebody who is, where the screen is not changing at all. I'd be moving around, the background is staying the same. We're used to television and movies where things change and it's a little bit more interesting. So if you're giving a standard presentation where people can see you, what you'd want to do is you want to move around the room a little bit. I'm making sure that I'm using my body language. I'm not coming up with special hand gestures. By the way, with a webcam, a few things when it comes to style and movement. If you move too close to the camera, my hands look enormous. Make sure you don't do that. And something that I've seen at a company I even worked at one point, is we would do a video conference with all the different bureaus around the country and internationally, and they would take their notes of people in the other bureaus, and they would put it in front of their computer, and they would read, and we'd be looking into somebody's scalp, and the light is pushing in there, and you can see more of their scalp. It wasn't flattering, and it wasn't helping anything at all. So these are a few things that you can do when you're doing your virtual presentations. Let's also add what to wear. What should you wear if people can actually see you like you can see me today? Well, you should dress in a way that best represents who you are and what you do. And I always say you should just take it up a little bit of a notch anyway, especially if you are an authority on something or hope to be an authority on something. So of course I made sure to wear a tie and look nice today. And if I were standing up and I wanted to make a presentation in front of my coworkers, I would dress in a way that best represents who I am, and I would move around, I'd look people in the eye. These are great for the standard presentations. Questions. Now this is the reason why I put this under style, is some people say I will hold questions to the end, and all that does is frustrate people. A presentation is when somebody is presenting information. And when we make it one way and we just say, I will not answer any of your questions, and I said below you can put in your questions there and you can have them answered even while I'm talking here. We're making sure that you get answers. If you do that and you don't take questions, then people will be frustrated. They want to know the answer and they don't necessarily want to wait. And obviously you have to work around the constraints that you have, but you have to make sure that you do the job that you promised, which is to get the right answers to people and to help them. But this is one of our fears, as you see on the screen. One of our fears is that those questions are really objections that people have. Oh no, what if I can't deal with objections? The way I see it is, you should always want objections. You should be wishing for objections. Here's why. When you're just giving a presentation, if somebody's sitting there and they're thinking, I don't like this guy, I don't believe what he's saying, if it were me, I completely disagree, I would want to know that. I'd want to know it early on so I can say, tell me why. Oh, you don't think it works for your kind of presentation, tell me. Well, here's how we would do it, or here's why you would or wouldn't use this method. I'd want to deal with that right away. Now, if you can't talk to somebody, and I can't talk to every one of you right now outside of you being able to email me or put in the chat box a question, I might even bring up a potential objection. You might say, I might do it this way. I might say, now some of you are thinking to yourself, you know what, Jess, I hate PowerPoint and I just want to look people in the eye and talk to them. So to that I would say, if that best supports what you do, then maybe you email somebody some sort of handout and say, I'll tell you what, if you can print this out and put it next to you, let's talk via Skype or even just over the phone, and I'll tell you what it is that we do and why we're the best in the world. Maybe that is a great idea. Maybe it's not a great idea. It's for you to figure out as you decide what works for you and your company. Let's jump over to substance. So we had style. Substance is also very important. We have to have style and substance. And when it comes to substance, it makes me think of this quote. If you're selling fire extinguishers, you ready? Always open with fire. David Ogilvy, big advertising guru and executive, used to say that, a big quote of his. And here's how it relates to presentations, and something that I always think about, which is you should open with fire. Instead of just, hello, thank you for having me, it's been great to be here, let me list the agenda of what we're going to talk about. Notice today I didn't do any of those things. In fact, I didn't give you my bio until about 5 minutes in. I made sure to start with something different, which was an image of me on video as opposed to just a boring PowerPoint screen. And then I went into the different types of presentations. So we were already in it. Then, oh, by the way, here's who I am. I could have done that sooner, I could have done it later, but the point is I started with something big, I opened with fire, and I challenge all of you to figure out ways that you can open with fire. When I do workshop in a company and I go there and we can actually see each other, I will videotape them, and it's great when we do the exercise of opening with fire because people find interesting ways to take sometimes not so interesting information and make it amazing. And it's not standing on chairs and trying to be like somebody out of a movie. It's about opening in an interesting way and grabbing your audience and holding on to them. We're going to talk about how you can continue to hold on to them. So we're talking about substance, and boy, that guy is possibly all substance. I see him moving his hands, so there's a little bit of style there. Here's a quick question for you. What is more important, style or substance? You ready? Go ahead, I'm going to give you a second to think about it. What's more important, style or substance? You ready? They're both important. You can't have one without the other. All right, we're back here. So we have that nice young gentleman with his science project, it looks like, and lots of words. That's what we normally get, say, even with a PowerPoint. But you need to have stories, and stories with a point, as we talked about earlier. But you must also have that strong opening and a strong close. So open with fire, close with fire. And where are you in your presentation? Are you a part of it? What's your story? Are you revealing some of yourself? Did any of this happen to you? I mean, don't make it all about you, but sometimes people do the opposite. I don't get to know who you are at all. So when relevant, I'll bring up myself. I probably did enough of it today. I was a former TV producer. I work with people on media training and presentation training, and this actually would be the one area where they intersect. Media training is helping people to be in front of the media, TV, print, radio, and now internet media. But these webcasts or video conferences are really that area where it brings both together, and I get to show you some interesting things. But where's your story? Where's that coming through? I did mention that stories are the currency of life, and you should be thinking, where can I find stories? Or this is a great story. This just happened to me. I should jot down basic ideas. This would support what I'm saying when I go and give that presentation in 2 weeks. I often hear from people when I do some work with them. I just heard this last week. A woman in the group said, oh, I'm not really a storyteller. Well, when we did an exercise similar to the one, tell me about your weekend, well, she launched into a story. And she realized that it's a natural skill that we all have. And turns out we're better at it. And she said, well, then I don't have any stories. Well, after about 2 minutes, she realized she had plenty of stories. Everything, that's the way we take in life and we communicate. And those stories can be used as your open and your close. You know, I said open with fire. But you can also use a story. You can say something surprising. You can use a question. Did you ever notice when someone asks you a question that you can't help but try to give the answer or think of an answer? Right now, your mind might be thinking of the answer. Did you ever notice that when someone asks you a question, your mind can't help but answer it? Well, let's see. Do I answer it? You're answering it right now. There's a power to questions. You could open with questions. Something that works very, very well. Jump back in here. Let's do some PowerPoint pointers for you as we see there. And one thing I want you to notice about PowerPoint that I built today is I basically took stock photos, and this is just an image, and these are 3 boxes with text in it. That's it. This is a stock image of money. And instead of using the template, remember I said earlier the templates are usually boring? I went and I took what was a text box, but I had it curved. I said, why don't you have a green background like money? And I twisted it sideways slightly. That's all I did. I did not have to build anything special. Notice here, when I talked about opening with fire, this is white with black text and an image. And then I go to something completely different to grab the person who's watching. And it goes from white to black. And I did that with some of the text as well, with white and black. And obviously, in this case, red. And when we use PowerPoint, no, we don't do that. We just take the template that shows up and we type in our information, and it's usually horrible. And this is just a text box tilted sideways. We also have these builds, so I will use this, and I will show you the opposite in just a moment. But it's very important to realize when it comes to PowerPoint, you're the main course, and the PowerPoint is the dessert. Take that in for a second. You're the main course, the PowerPoint is the dessert. Only use PowerPoint or any of the other peripherals if it enhances what you're saying. Now you may say, here's how I deal with an objection since I can't necessarily hear you. Some of you might be thinking, Jess, I give webinars. I have to use PowerPoint. Well, I had one organization that I met with and I helped them with their webinars. And they said, you know, the best webinar we ever gave was the one where the platform broke down and it was like a radio show. We essentially just answered people's questions. We got the highest feedback. People loved it. We loved it. It was more interesting and it worked better. Well, there's some data for you. Most of the time when I do these interactive presentations with people, I tend to do it as a teleconference. You know what? I'm going to go through some things that you might need a few things that are on your mind, and I open the phone line so that people can talk and we don't necessarily have to deal with a text box, and it's much easier. That's my choice. Obviously today I did not choose that. Less words are better. So we have smaller bullet points there, but of course you've seen it all loaded up. That wouldn't be so great. People remember visuals. This is the way our brains work as human beings. We remember visuals. So part of the reason to tell a story is because stories are very visual. And people can see it, they can taste the information, they can smell it, they can remember it. And when it comes to the purpose of a presentation or a speech, and I want to just take a second to bring this up, we have a few important steps we need to move through. The first is, step one, people need to understand what it is that you're saying. So this is actually a tiny bit different than just PowerPoint, and I'll jump back to that in a moment. People need to understand what you're saying. If they can't hear you, or you have an accent, or it's too low on the computer, and I know that we set the levels on this, so I hope you can hear me, then you're dead in the water. In the sales world, they say a confused mind always says no. And we don't want that. We want people to agree with what you're saying and do something. Level two, People need to remember what it is that you said. If they understood it, how can they remember it? Through the use of visuals or stories that create a visual in our brain. So if I go back to our PowerPoint screen here, and I took that off the screen, our little visual, wow, really boring and not memorable at all. And yeah, a little bit better, but would that be better? That would be much better. If I was making a point, what's the point with this? Okay, here comes a point. The point, and I do have one. The point is that the best way this woman can give that information to people? Now, it looks like she has a Wikipedia webpage. Wikipedia, not necessarily the definitive fact-based place that you can give people. It's I'm trying to say it's not the New York Times or Encyclopedia Britannica, and you could probably debate me on both of those too. But she's one step ahead of the boring PowerPoint. So if she's talking about how to work your way through Wikipedia, how do you use it? Well then I want to see it. I want to see her clicking around and doing things. Also, doing something with a live internet connection is a little bit risky. And there are certain risks that we're taking with this video that we're doing here too, and certain things that we've done to mitigate those risks. All right, let's keep going. So you saw that we had those words on a screen and people remember visuals. So if my point was that you're the main course and the PowerPoint is the dessert, would it have been better if I just showed you this? And if I were in person and I were walking around and that was behind me on the screen, you think that would be a little bit more interesting and memorable? And yes, made a few people hungry. You're the main course and the PowerPoint is just the dessert. Always be thinking about those visuals, and when you are delivering a PowerPoint and you're even in front of people, certainly right now, I'm sitting in front of a computer. I can have, as I've showed you a few times, notes. I know what's coming next. So if I say, you know, when you're standing in front of people and reading to them, click, you have to see, is this something that's enhancing what you're doing or is it taking away? My point, I have 2 points. One is you can let the PowerPoint follow you. If you have notes, I tend to call it my set list, like a musician. That's the proper way to use notes. And you can do it during a webinar. You can have it just to the side. But one thing I can tell you with certainty, people do not like being read to. So if you are giving a webinar or virtual presentation, you sound like you're reading. You will lose people. You will lose them right away. And if you're standing in front of people, that woman looks like she's delighted. People may not like it, but you may realize maybe you don't need PowerPoint. That's a possibility too. And I had said to you before, I could deliver everything that I want to deliver to you today, and I have a number of YouTube-style videos. I'm happy to send some of them to you if you like, if you reach out. But talk about different techniques people can use. And they're usually about a minute, minute and a half, because that's the proper amount of time to deliver that information before people get bored. If you're just seeing me like you are, with the background of New York City behind me, if it's longer, then I have to come up with something to make it more interesting. But what I want you to think about is, do you even need PowerPoint? Maybe you don't. Maybe you can just speak to people. Maybe you can do it as a teleconference. Here's another PowerPoint technique, something I call the blank slide. Oh, let me make it blank all the way. It's a blank slide. Here's what this is. Essentially, when you're giving a presentation, if you're in person and you want people to look at you, you can put nothing up on the screen. I guess I should point this way so I'm pointing the right direction of that slide. But I'm also pointing behind me if I were giving a PowerPoint presentation. For a webinar, the blank screen, you know what I love about the virtual presentation? I can do air quotes on this. I would put what I call the holder slide up, which is the title, or maybe it's something even more boring that just has some of the logos. But the point in using this as a technique is, if I were to put it up, you see that it's just the basic idea, I can go off and talk about things without you sitting there trying to read everything else that's on the screen and going through while I say something completely different. I would just put up the holder screen, or in person, I would let it be a blank screen. And then you will see people's eyes lock in on you and what you're saying. You'll command their attention. By the way, this is the way it looks when you're organizing it. So if you're handing a PowerPoint off to somebody else, they will see that you now have twice as many slides. Oh no, how long will this thing be? No, don't worry. There are just, as you see here, blank slides in between so that we can go from idea to idea. How many ideas should be on the screen at once? There really should only be one idea at a time. That's another important point that I like to make for people. All right, let's shift over and let's talk a little bit about fear and fear of speaking. That guy looks a little bit scared. And when it comes to fear of speaking, it's not really a fear of speaking. It really is something that we haven't done all the time. It's not something that we do on an ongoing basis usually, meaning stand up and give a special presentation, although we communicate certainly one-on-one all the time, but not necessarily to a group or not with everybody staring right at us. I'll tell you what fear of speaking really is. It's fear of the unknown. That's what it is. The good news is there are techniques we can use to get past it. So one is be audience-centered. Focus all your energies on how you can help that person. If I did what was best for me today, it would have just been to do an audio conference on how you can do better webinars. I wouldn't have had to make up any special slides. I would not have had to dress a certain way. I wouldn't have to comb my hair. You wouldn't see me at all. Wouldn't have to do any of those things. And I could read from a script if I wanted to. Hopefully I wouldn't sound like I was reading from a script. Be audience-centered. Don't focus on you. That's part of being audience-centered. And here's something else that's brand new. Practice power poses. Oh, what is that about? This is something that I've added more recently, and I think it's something that you're going to like. And I put it under the banner of confidence and the missing pieces. And when I break it down, confidence is really a theme that I see coming up often when I work with certain groups. There's usually someone in the room where confidence is an issue. So step one is, if you look the part, you get credit for it. If you look the part, you get credit for it. So take a deep breath and go in there and do it and own it. Actors say that you have to commit to what it is that you're doing. You have to commit to it. And that doesn't mean committing to saying the wrong thing. Somebody says, Jess, I disagree with you. Well, I will punch you. No, it doesn't mean that. It means committing to you being the leader. Okay, but that's step one. Step two is being able to get past that unknown. So how do you do that? If it's a room, you walk in, you see the room and see what's there and put yourself in the space and practice doing it. You can practice doing your whole presentation in that spot or even at home. Just that will make it better. And there are other important ways that you can practice that, well, certainly when we show up and we work with people in a company, something that is probably even better than everything I've given them during the day, well, I hope I've given them great information, is them practicing it and putting it into use and owning the information. Then we videotape it and we play it back, and it's amazing. So confidence, you see that person, he looks the part, he gets credit for it, but here comes the power pose. You ready? The arms up. Now, studies have been done. There's a great speech I'll give you some information for by Amy Cuddy that's on the internet. And she says animals in the wild, primates, hold their hands up when they have victory. Little children who have never seen this before. Actually, one of my kids, when he was 4, and we said, yes, you can have ice cream, and it was late at night, and we were on a trip somewhere, and he dropped to his knees. Yes, yes. He did that. He never saw that anywhere. He doesn't watch marathoners. This power pose is something that is seen in the animal world and the human world. People who are blind actually have done this when they are excited. Why am I bringing up what's the point? Something interesting happens when you do this. It makes you more confident and it reduces stress. Jess, are you overselling it? No. Here's what happened. There's something that actually happens to us on a chemical level. Testosterone goes up and cortisol, the stress hormone, goes down. And ladies, don't worry, it doesn't mean you're going to grow a big furry mustache. It means that you will feel more powerful. If you do this, you have to do it for 2 minutes, by the way. And I should point out that you probably wouldn't do this in front of other people. You can be, as we see here, in your office. Maybe you shut the door if you have a door, or you go into the restroom, somewhere not in front of people. And I really encourage you to do it right now as you're watching this. Hold your hands up, do the power pose, and you will notice I already feel much better doing this. I should have done it right before the webinar today. I should know better. Practice what you preach, Jess. I should have gone and done this because it feels fantastic. Testosterone is increased. You feel better, more interesting, more powerful. And cortisol, the stress hormone, actually goes down. They've done these tests. You should do a quick internet search for Amy Cuddy TED Talk, and you'll see her 20-minute talk on it. It's really fabulous. But it's something that I've started telling people and telling them to use, because we have to have style and substance when you go out and you give any type of presentation. All right, we're winding things down here, and I hope that I gave you a lot of information that you can use. And in a moment, I will talk last little bit about a few of those different types of presentation tools that I talked about in the very beginning here. But one important tool, when I said use more visuals, people like visuals, they remember. Well, big stock photo, I don't make any money by bringing them up. I should, but I don't. Out of all the different stock photo sites out there, people always say, you can find photos for $1 or $2. Well, this site, you actually can find photos for $1 or $2. And they're really easy to download and just copy and paste right into a PowerPoint or whatever your delivery mechanism is. You can take pictures yourself. We are all walking around with phones that have great cameras in them now, much better than they ever were. And obviously you can take a fancier camera, but you can take pictures. I had a CEO who was traveling around to different factories, and he realized, wait, I could just take pictures of what I'm talking about. So when I say you're working on the pipeline and safety is important, we can see the pipeline and we can see the people that he actually goes out and talks to and him posing with them. It was fantastic. Just make sure that you don't make anything public that has faces in it if you're trying to say people are awful or something like that. Something from my old TV news days. Wikimedia Commons is something that's on the internet where you can get royalty-free photos and you can hunt around in there. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, so I'd rather just spend $1. Some people ask me, what about Google Images? The problem with Google Images is often you're just stealing from anybody who's out there. And if it's something internal, well, I guess you can just get away with it. If it's something you're broadcasting to the world, you might as well just take a couple of extra steps to pay. Make sure you're not a data dumper. This is hard to read and it's boring. Don't do that. So when it comes to inspiring people, when it comes to making something happen, my goal for you as I wrap this up, but I'm going to move into the bonus section where I really talk about some of those delivery mechanisms. My hope for all of you is that you connect with people, that you can speak in a more visual way, storytelling, that you can make your PowerPoints more interesting, as you've seen a few of the things that I've done today. And this is basically just text. I can move this around here. This is something that I used a special generator on a free website to generate interesting looking text, and I copied and pasted it and turned it sideways. This is a picture here. You can make better PowerPoints, so whether you are standing in front of people or, as you see there, giving a virtual presentation, either of those two, I want you to think of one thing. I want you to think of your audience, and I want you to think about the actual results that you want to make happen when you're giving presentations. So I thank you for taking time out. And if you want to get a hold of me, my email address is Jess at successinmedia.com, and I'm happy to either answer your questions, and certainly if you have questions about me working with you or your organization, or maybe I even have some free items or videos or something I can just give to you. I've been known to do that. Maybe I would do that. So you can do that, and I encourage you to take the next steps. Don't just watch what you saw today. Take those next steps and do something big. I'm Jess Todtfeld. Thank you for tuning in. All right, now the bonus. It's time for the bonus section of our video, and I will scroll back through to, let's see here, to the top and make it so that you can see a little of everything. All right. Who doesn't love a little bit of bonus? Go to webinar. This is just me giving you some feelings of how things have worked or haven't worked. Some small business people that I work with use GoToWebinar, and they do webinar every month. And you know what? When it comes to marketing, it's frequency plus relevancy. And if you can put something out every month and it's relevant to the people that you have, I should add one other piece, plus reach, and you actually have a decent list, you can make big things happen. But use more images, make it more interesting. Do it in half the time, if that would be better. It's something that would make it, I think, you'd have more ROI on something like that. Okay, Skype. I have started doing something that I think has worked very nicely, Skype lunches. So I have people that I work with in other cities, and I said to them, hey, let's do a Skype lunch. And sometimes we're actually eating lunch, and sometimes we're not. And I usually won't pick food where it's falling out of my mouth. But we've met via Skype and had a little conversation, and I have another speaker that it talks on another topic than I talk about, and the two of us try once every week or two. We'll do a Skype chat and chew, as we like to call it. And we compare ideas, and it's fantastic, and you can see the other person, and it really works well. And I had said before that it takes a little bit more clicking around if you don't have the premium version, but if you turn your camera off, then you have the option to share a screen, and that really is fantastic. A lot of people ask me which one is better, Livestream, Ustream, Justin TV. Really, you have to test them all with your computer, and you have to test to find out all the nuances. The reason why I switched to Mac was because I do a lot of video work, as I'm doing today, and just PCs are just not built for that. I know somebody will argue with me, I have one that is. Well, great, as long as it works for you, but it never seemed to work for me, and it always seemed to get slower and slower. So this has worked well. I have Livestream up there. There's something that I'm using right now called Livestream Procaster, and that is a free download, and you can do what you saw here, where I can even do a little bit of a 3D mix. How about that? And you have these little buttons that you can click on at the bottom of the screen so that you can go from full camera, you can go to just screen, you can go to that 2D mix, or you can go to the 3D mix, and you can record this as a video that you can upload to YouTube, or you can do it live through Livestream. And the only reason why I didn't do it through Livestream today was because I noticed that there were a few steps with people signing in that would cause a roadblock for a few of you, and there was some choppiness that I noticed would cause the lips to go out of sync, and I don't like that. That would annoy me, not only as the person giving it, but the person on the receiving end. YouTube, I think, is fantastic for doing short informational videos. You can subscribe, and you'd have to send me an email, and I'm happy to share it with you, but either on the media training side or the presentation training side, and actually I have a few others for other areas of my business related to communication skills and training, you can subscribe to a short email from me, not a newsletter. I hate the phrase newsletter or the word newsletter because we don't know where the value is. But you can get a weekly video from me that's essentially a YouTube video, and it goes out and people get it and can respond, and it basically says, here's one quick short strategy that you can try and practice. So if you want to know about that, you can email me, but that's a great way to use that. now, I said that, kids are using it. I have less experience with it, but it's interesting. It's similar to some of the others. Google Hangouts I have used and has some interesting features. It feels like it's getting close to catching up with Skype, but I like things that just work and work quickly, which is why if somebody else has a Mac device, we've just done FaceTime, you can click on their contact information and then they just pop up, and it's really great. I've been in a store and I called my wife and said, should I get this? And I put it on FaceTime, and there you go, and I'm doing a little virtual presentation of what I see in the store there. Maybe a gift for her. WebEx, I have some companies that are thrilled with WebEx and they use it and they have worked out some of the kinks. Here's my suggestion also. If you're noticing on the screen there that guy who's sitting next to some weird background and he has his t-shirt and this weird headset, think about the way it looks on the other end. I've helped some companies or helped set them up or told them how to set up. Right now I have what is called a softbox light, which is basically a light with a big diffused screen on it, and I only have one light on right now, and it does the job in this particular area. And then this is just a backdrop that has the cityscape of the city that I'm in. And I can do green screen, not usually with the virtual presentations because there are just a number of other steps that I don't love. It can be done. There are apps, I've played with them, but it starts to look too artificial. I mean, I made a joke about the fact that that's not the real background. I am in New York, but the wall that's right there is not as impressive as seeing those. But if I had a green screen, you could see the little line around me. Something would be fake, and then you would feel that I'm fake. You may want nothing to do with me, and that's not what I'm going for. SlideShare. SlideShare, you should really poke around. It's a great place if you want to be a thought leader, to take some of the ideas and actually take some of the ideas that you have, share them there. But something that's great is you can see interesting things that people are doing with building their PowerPoints. And I'll tell you, half the time when I say, oh, I'd love to do this, I'd love to have, let's see something that I did here. Here we go. When I'm talking about the starting point, I'm a former runner. I say former because I don't do a whole lot of it these days. I always think of the starting line and, the track. Well, great. Stock photo, words, done. You can do this easily, and you can even come up with a SlideShare slide, as I try to go back over here, to be able to share with other people. But you can see what they're doing, and it really is fantastic. And I did show Prezi before and double-clicked on that, so you can see some of it. They're doing amazing things. And for me, I think I would only use it for little promos or as an introduction to the day or at the end of the day when I'm showing what we did. But I think sometimes maybe too much movement. But I like that it's different and that it's not just the standard next, 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 next. I think it's something that a lot of people should consider, even if for a piece of your presentation. And again, PowerPoint versus if you want to jump into going over here to Keynote, look, you have to come up with something that works. And again, like I said, you don't have to use their backdrops that they have, the templates, because they're just not as interesting. So those are some of the main outlets that are out there. If I forgot anyone, make sure that you reach out to me, and putting up the older screen on there. I hope this extra bonus section was informative. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear who you are and how I can help you, and I probably do have something else. And if you want to hear exactly how we work with a company, how we take your specific needs and create a program around it, using all the various choices that we have to pull from what it is we tell people, find out, reach out. In the meantime, I'm Jess Todtfeld. Thanks for being here today.